Welcome to Truth by Billie Beene. Today's date, October 11, 2025. Time in Texas about 1 p.m. And today in Brazoria County, Texas, it's also our Fair Parade Day. So way to go. Some of the sources I'll use, Hal Turner, BPEARTHWATCH, Stephen Burns, Judge Napolitano, Alex Christopherou, plus some of the things I'll cover. The Sun, Atlas, crash, and what's up with the Nobel Peace Prize? Could it be tied to deep state politics? We'll see. And in the U.S., American citizens are virtually not watching TV. Plus, what about Europe stamping passports and now using biometrics tomorrow? So let's get started. I want to begin with a tropical update. So we have, coming off of Africa, a new system. So we have Africa, the U.S. We have a new system forming, but it has 10% chance of development in 48 hours, 30% in 7 to 10 days. Now, we also have this smaller system, Jerry, which is a tropical storm turning back to the east. We expect this new system developing also to turn back to the east. I believe we're seeing all of these tropical systems turn back to the east, away from the U.S. I submit this could be a function of the Earth tilting. So that's going on. Jerry, tropical storm, is currently at 50 miles per hour. Barometric at 1005, moving north at 14 miles per hour. So that's going on. What do we see going on in space? So we have more and more sources bringing out good photos and science about Atlas not being a comet or an asteroid, making its way through our solar system to go by. We know Mars, Venus, Jupiter. Some are speculating it could turn out and go to by Saturn. But I put this forth. BPEARTHWATCH has brought out, some more images from various James Webb, the Hubble, and so on, showing we have what I describe as a mothership with a corona of light around it that's currently green, followed by many ships. So even if this mothership goes by Mars, Venus, Jupiter, and then on to Saturn, we still have these other ships that could turn back and interact with the Earth. I do believe this correlates to historical, geological, astronomy, and so on, of the return of ETs, many call Anunnaki. I do not believe we are going to have an extinction level event, and I believe we can pray against this invasion of Earth by ETs. Do I believe it's possible that ETs could be out there and returning? We have many historical material from multiple civilizations going back tens of thousands of years, documenting a periodic return to the Earth of ETs. So yeah, I believe it's possible, and but I also believe we can pray it away. So that's going on. However, so with this cycle, and I believe it's a cycle we see many speculate every 13,000 years with the pole shift, something going on astronomically in space, return of these so-called sky people who are likely, if they make it to Earth, say, we're your creators, and we can tell them to shut up. So this is a cycle, and we see things interacting, and we see this historically, the sun, the earth, the ETs, and it affects earthquakes, volcanoes on Earth, the stock market, and we're seeing that. Now, we had earthquakes in the past 24 hours in Papua New Guinea at 6.3. We had near the Drake Passage, so we have Antarctica, the South Pole. We have South America. We have the Drake Passage. We've had several large earthquakes there recently. We had another one in the last 24 hours, a 7.6. And recently in that area, we had a 7.4, 7.5. Now, many believe in Antarctica that we do have underground ET bases and so on. So that could be affected by what's going on in space. And we had also a 7.4 in the Philippines. So that's going on. And we saw on yesterday, October 10, many signs of market crash. Now, Mike from around the world says about Atlas that NASA cameras have been turned off, and I've put that out recently. The U.S. government and governments around the world have shut off space data to their publics, and that the European ESA camera picked up some good pictures of Atlas. And Mike from around the world says governments have info, but they're not sharing. And we have Avi Loeb, astrophysicist, Harvard, who is supporting Atlas is not a comet, and most likely is under intelligent control, a spaceship. So that's going on. And we have this. So Hal Turner brings out yesterday, October 10, we saw a swift sell-off of paper silver. Paper silver and paper gold means you contact a silver or gold seller and you buy them, and they say, oh, we'll store your silver and gold here. We'll send you a paper certificate. And many who work in that field say, if you don't hold it, you don't own it. That the paper silver, paper gold is much like a Ponzi scheme. However, yesterday, 130% of the supply of paper silver sold off in a matter of hours. It was dumped. So that's going on. We also had a flash crash in crypto yesterday, taking down the crypto market by $500 billion. Now, Alex CHRISTEFEROU puts this forth, that there were people who shorted the market and made millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars yesterday, 30 minutes before President Trump announced that he was putting 100% tariffs on China. So we see inside trader knowledge appearing to be going on. So yes, Alex CHRISTEFEROU said President Trump yesterday also put 100% tariff on all Chinese goods, and that's on top of the existing tariff on China of 30%. So Chinese goods now have 130% tariff on all their goods. And we see China also yesterday saying it was cutting its export of rare earth minerals on a global basis. Now, Alex Christoforou brings out about Venezuela. And Venezuela, believe it or not, is tied to the Nobel Peace Prize that someone other than President Trump won yesterday. So we have Venezuela. And we know we have at least 10 U.S. warships plus planes and many other ships and so on going on. We have Venezuela. We have Colombia. Okay. So Alex Christoforou says in the New York Times that Maduro is desperate to avoid military conflict with the U.S. and to keep his seat. And he was trying to negotiate with the U.S. We'll give you all of our oil and anything else of value. But this negotiation was stopped cold by President Trump's Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. No, the U.S. is intent on taking out the cartels and regime change. So that's going on. And we have this. Melania Trump has been working directly with the Russian government. Now, I put out over a year ago. It's widely believed that Melania Trump is part of the Russian Tsar families. We know there was a Tsar line in Russia that was executed, but there were supposedly some members of the family who escaped, and that Melania Trump is directly related to the Russian Tsar families. So Melania has been working directly with the Russian government to unite children, Ukrainian and Russian, with their families who have been displaced by the military conflict. We understand that recently over 100 children were united with their families through the joint effort of Melania Trump and the Russian government. So that's a very positive finding. And also, multiple sources have been bringing out the real numbers of displaced children, which is less than 500, not the millions that Zelensky, the deep state puppet, masquerading as the president of Ukraine, is putting forth. So that's going on. We have this Judge Napolitano interviewed Larry Johnson, former CIA, and Ray McGovern. He was also in Intel. And what about that Nobel Peace Prize? Well, we have this. It was given out yesterday. So the Nobel Peace Prize. Now let's recall, remember Obama? I mean, he wasn't even born an American citizen and really had no college records, but he was president, a truly deep state positioned president. As soon as he won president of the U.S., the Nobel Peace Prize group, obviously now controlled totally by deep state politics, saying Obama had won the Peace Prize. Well, yeah, he was their number one deep stater that year. So yesterday we had the Nobel Peace Prize not going to a legitimate peacemaker, President Trump, but to the deep state candidate to replace Maduro. So what does that mean for the U.S.? Now taking military action against Venezuela to displace Maduro, and Is another deep stater going to come in? Only time will tell. I believe it's really up to God, not the deep state. But this individual, Maria Machado, is a deep state candidate to replace Maduro. She's been involved in Venezuelan politics for years. And Maria Machado, when she won the Nobel Peace Prize, she said, "I dedicate this to President Trump." And I got this to say to Maria Machado: shut up. We see a political deep state move in place. The Nobel Peace Prize, in my opinion, should have gone to President Trump. He's already negotiated peace in up to 8 or 9 different areas, many countries. He is a peacemaker. This Maria Machado is a deep state politician who in no way merits the Nobel Peace Prize based on what is put forth to represent what the prize actually represents. But I submit it's a deep state political prize given to the newest deep stater. Now, Maria Machado will not be able to take the place of Maduro without the approval of President Trump. But to come out and say, "Oh, I accept the Nobel Peace Prize, but I dedicate it to President Trump." Maria Machado, shut up. So that's going on. And we see this. We see Steve calls aggregate site a source express. Yeah. So President Trump, in line with the new rules of engagement put forth by Secretary of War Pete Hegseth recently, that the U.S. would engage in new rules of engagement, and we see the U.S. military taking out these small drug boats along the coast of Venezuela. Well, one taken out most recently, the president of Colombia, Petro, says, that wasn't Venezuela, that was Colombia. I got this to say to Petro, yeah, what are you thinking coming out and saying, taking responsibility for a boat transporting drugs? And Petro wants to say to the U.S. military, stop that. Okay. And now we have this. CBS News is putting forth that Congress on Thursday or Friday voted down a resolution that would have blocked President Trump from striking the drug boats. So we see Congress supporting President Trump and the American people. So we have this going on. Danny HAIPHONG recently interviewed Larry Johnson, former CIA, Petra Kinnigan, and another journalist, talking about Israel. Now, many have come forth with that assassination of Charlie Kirk. So we see Charlie Kirk was assassinated, and many are saying it was the usual suspects, the CIA, the FBI, MI6, Mossad. Mossad is the intel arm of Israel. Now, do I believe that every single employee in the CIA, FBI, MI6, and Mossad is a traitor to their own country and probably double and triple agents and whatever? No, I don't. Do I believe enough are that they can bring about an assassination of strong political figures like Charlie Kirk? Yes, I do. And it has come forth from multiple sources that Charlie Kirk was taking moving away from a position of Zionism. Anything Israel does is okay. He was moving away from that. So Israel realizes it's losing control of media platforms. So now, with the assassination of Charlie Kirk, they put his wife in place. But the Zionist billionaires also brought in, I think, about something like $200 million to Turning Point USA to build strong chapters and colleges and go forth with their Zionist message, which I believe is not a religious doctrine, but a political indoctrination. Israel now wants to buy other platforms. They want to buy TikTok. And recently, through one of their proxies, Ellison, they have bought CBS. And now they are eyeing buying X. So it'll be interesting to see if Elon Musk will sell X to the Zionist billionaires. So that's going on. Now, Larry Johnson brought out some numbers, and that correlates to information I put out a few months ago about how many Americans I put out the information that I believed no more than 50 million. So that's 50 million out of our current 335 million population is watching TV at any time, any programs. Larry brings out information about how in the past we had the TV being used as a strong propaganda platform by the U.S. government to control the American people. And so in 1968, and this is news outlets on the three big stations, ABC, NBC, CBS. In 1968, we had 27 million Americans watching news on TV. Today, in 2016, we have numbers that we now have. No, we had 27 million in 2016. And in 1968, we had 54 million watching news on TV. Now, this 54 million would have been out of a population of 13.9, 1 from 2, 295 million. We now have 27 million out of a population of 335. So we see a significant crash of Americans getting their news from TV. And the U.S. government cannot control the deep state, cannot control the multiple platforms that are now available to not just American citizens, but global citizens. So we're seeing more truth come out. So that's going on. And now we have this. Venezuela. So Russia, according to sources, has moved nukes to Venezuela. I submit this is like the Cuban crisis in 1962 when the U.S. put some nukes or some type of strategic bomb in Europe in a position that would hit Russia. It might have been in Turkey. So then Russia moved nukes to Cuba. So now we see the U.S. Moving nuclear capable, or supposed to move nuclear capable tomahawks to Ukraine. So we see Russia now moving nukes to Venezuela. This looks like the Cuban crisis 2.0 to me. But multiple sources are saying in the last few weeks, Russia has moved nukes to Venezuela. And of course, they would have to move. The Venezuelan military, I don't believe, would have the capability to launch those nukes. So I'd would have to assume Russian troops are also on the ground there. We have this from Chief Coil's aggregate site Reporter News. Yes, and within the past 48 hours, the Russian Duma, the Russian government, has ratified a military cooperation agreement with Cuba. So we see the U.S. and Cuba are squaring off in what appears to be a nuclear military standoff. We have this from Hal Turner about Ukraine and Russia conflict. So we see that Russia is making strides in Ukraine, and I submit this. We have Russia, Belarus, Ukraine. Now, we have Russia has already taken the Donbass area. That was one of the Donbass, was Donetsk and Luhansk. Zaporizhzhia, Kherson, they already had Crimea. But Russia is now moving further to the west, and now we see Ukraine evacuating citizens out of Kramatorsk and Sloviansk. These are two large cities right along this area of the Donbass with large populations. So that's going on. And we have this. Dr. William Mount. Will President Trump bring about the Insurrection Act? And that could allow the U.S. military, armed forces, under certain circumstances to move against groups that the U.S. government has designated as terrorist organizations. So that's going on. And we have this, that Putin has said to his generals, take Ukraine now. And that Ukraine has had a loss this past month of 9,000 dead per week. And that Ukraine oil and gas reserves are down by 50%. And that Russia continues to take down the Ukraine power grid. This, just as a very cold winter comes on. We have this, that a federal grand jury has indicted New York Attorney General Letitia James on mortgage fraud. So remember Letitia James, AG of New York, making up charges against President Trump? Well, this went to a federal grand jury. They were presented evidence. Letitia James is now being indicted for mortgage fraud. We have this from the Daily Caller. We've seen the deep state Soros-funded Antifa a terrorist organization operating in the U.S. against federal employees, ICE, the U.S. Marshals, Homeland Security, FBI, and so on. So we see that going on. And now, Antifa in Portland, Oregon, is being trained by the Deep State Soros group to take down the U.S. government, the federal agencies' helicopters by coordinating a laser attack on the helicopters. Well, gee, that sounds like some serious criminal charges could be forthcoming. All right. Now, I put this forth about the digital ID. And I said, I believe it's already in place on a global basis. And that governments now are rolling it out to their citizens simply to get their citizens on board with what these governments already have operating in their database. Well, on October 12, tomorrow, we have many European nations are not going to be stamping passports. Instead, if you're a non-European citizen and you are coming into Europe on a short stay, they're not going to stamp your passport. Instead, they're going to scan your face and your fingerprints. Why can they do that tomorrow? It's because the digital ID databases already exist. And this will be operative tomorrow in all over Europe, including France, Germany, many nations along with Poland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Bulgaria, and so on. And also includes Norway, Iceland, and Switzerland. So that's going on, but I submit the only reason we're hearing now about digital IDs being put forth by various governments is because the governments globally now have the databases connected, they're in place, and they're simply rolling it out to get the citizens on board. So that's going on. Yep, and this information is verified by source Visa Verge. So that's going on. It's good to be in prayer for America, President Trump, who sadly lost the Nobel Peace Prize to a deep stater, and the U.S. military and world peace. I love you, and I'll see you soon.